I am David Everett, a science teacher with 38 years experience of teaching chemistry and now involved with training early career science teachers. Welcome to our short Starting Out webinar about conducting practical science lessons in a safe manner. In the next 10 minutes, I'm going to take you through the steps you should take to ensure that your practical science lessons are safe while remaining exciting and inspiring. You may wonder, what can I do in a science lesson? How can I be sure it is safe? Who is responsible for health and safety in a science lesson? Where can I find help with planning practical work and ensuring it is safe? Science teachers often worry about what they can and cannot do in a practical lesson, but I want you to gain more confidence to do and supervise practical work in a safe manner. There are many myths about what can and cannot be done in a school science laboratory, and it is my aim to let you know from where you can obtain reliable information about performing experiments and demonstrations safely. Think for a while about any school-related accidents you may have suffered, read about, or heard about from colleagues. These incidents may colour your view, but if you look at the statistics compiled by local authorities, you will find that very few incidents occur which are associated with practical work in science. Why is this? Properly done, practical science lessons will be well prepared and will have taken into account the advice and controls from a variety of government departments and professional bodies. So that you can know how to keep science safe, I will try to give you an insight into the advice that is easily available to you. If you are a member of the Association for Science Education, look at the brief article Safety Matters, which appeared in the September 2010 edition of Education in Science. This is also accessible to members on the ASE website. Hazards may be thought of as substances, apparatus, or circumstances which may cause harm. Risk may be thought of as the chance of a hazard actually causing harm. If the hazard is great and the risk is high, we need to consider how we may reduce the hazard and/or the risk. Let me make it clear that the responsibility for providing risk assessments lies clearly with your employer. As a teacher, it is your responsibility to familiarise yourself with the risk assessments provided and to follow the guidelines given. Sometimes the employer will provide only general or model risk assessments, and you will need to consider how they may need to be adjusted to cover the situation in which you are working. You may have to adapt or customise the risk assessment because of local conditions. For example, you may not have a working fume cupboard, or your class is too big to carry out some types of practical work, or your class is too lively on a Friday afternoon. Hazards can be identified from warning symbols, from standard publications such as HazCards, or the instructions for use provided with apparatus or materials. And don't forget common sense. Model risk assessments will give you an indication of how likely it is that things can go wrong, but you may need to think how this applies to your situation. Risks can rarely be eliminated completely other than by not doing an activity, but we can significantly reduce them by considering whether we can substitute a hazardous material or activity with a less hazardous one. The Kleep's guide, Safer Chemicals, Safer Reactions, will be useful here. We can often reduce risks to an acceptable level by reducing the quantity of material or the concentration of solutions used. Pre-weighing materials can reduce the risk of students using too much of a given substance. We can also consider segregation of the hazard from individuals. Techniques here may include making sure that the students and staff are separated to a safe distance from a hazard, such as a reaction that may result in a small explosion, or that the hazard is confined to a sealed container, such as when dealing with microorganisms. We should also consider when it is appropriate to use personal protection, such as laboratory coats, safety spectacles, goggles, face shields, or gloves. We should also consider what guidance or help is available within a school. Sometimes it is necessary to seek help from your head of department, but he or she may be very busy and not yet given you a full safety induction. But your science technicians can also be a very valuable source of advice about local conditions and should be asked to alert you to particular hazards when materials are requested. You should think about the class you are teaching. Some activities should be restricted to more mature and responsible groups, and model risk assessments will suggest which activities are appropriate for a particular age group. Some rooms are not suitable for a particular activity either, because they are too small for a large class, or because particular items of equipment are not available. If there is no fume cupboard, for instance, it may not be possible to carry out a procedure involving fumes, unless the procedure is carried out on a very small scale or with an alternative method of containment. As a teacher, you should have hands-on training in the more hazardous activities, and it would be wise to request this and practice the procedure before carrying out an activity with a class. Having customized a model risk assessment, we need to consider how we record our findings. It is sufficient to record what we need to do, not the reasons why, but where and in how much detail. Documents that are rarely accessed or away from your place of work are not appropriate. It is better to have an easily accessible document that is referred to regularly. The obvious document is the scheme of work. You do have to cooperate with your employer on health and safety matters, but most are happy with the annotated scheme of work approach because they recognize that this is what teachers and technicians actually read regularly. These are sensible ideas. We cannot eliminate all risks, and we do not want to get risks out of proportion, but deal with them in a sensible and proportionate manner. We can assess and deal with risks in ways that do not restrict the experiences of our students. One of the most authoritative sources of advice is the organisation CLEAPS, which provides guidance to teachers and employers and supplies a wealth of information, including model risk assessments. If you are not familiar with the CLEAPS website, ask your head of department for the current username and password and go online to explore the contents. There will be areas with which you will be familiar, such as HazCards, but there are many other resources you will find useful for your lesson preparation. What are the main sources of reliable information? I have already reminded you of the CLEAPS website, which includes the HazCards, recipe cards, laboratory handbook, and various guides and leaflets. The Association for Science Education also produces a number of publications including Topics in Safety, Safeguards in the School Laboratory, and Safe and Exciting Science. If these are not currently available in your department, perhaps you can ask for them to be purchased as part of the materials for staff in-service training. 2 final points. The CLEAPS Guide Health and Safety Induction of Science Teachers is an invaluable guide both for new teachers and for their line managers, and you will find it very useful for monitoring your own in-service training. If you are about to show or supervise an activity with a class, which you have not done before, make sure you practice it beforehand. If there is any significant hazard associated with it, make sure you practice it with a colleague present for your own safety. Now that we have gone through this webinar, you should know who is responsible for the safe conduct of practical lessons, where to find help and advice in planning safe practical work, and how to adopt model risk assessments for your own situation. Thank you for watching this Starting Out webinar on maintaining good health and safety in school science.